Hi there, this is Patrick Coleman. I'm the VP of Operations of Replit. So I'm a business guy, not an engineer, but I want to share with you all a quick training session that I did with one of our investors, Bloomberg Beta, whose investing thesis is the future of work. And one of the things that we're really excited about at Replit is making it easier for non-engineers and for anybody to be able to code, to automate part of their work, their lives, and kind of realize the fun and creative aspects of coding too. So with that in mind, a couple months ago, back when I did not have a mustache, I recorded a training session for the Bloomberg Beta team to walk them through the basics of web scraping and understanding how content is delivered on the web and how you can easily scrape that with Replit, with the Python programming language, and using the requests and BeautifulSoup packages. It's really easy. I am not an engineer, although I did take a lot of coding classes in school as a kid. Really loved it. So I'm sure there are mistakes both in my code and in the concepts that I'm describing. So please forgive me for that. But what you should take away from this video is just how easy it is to build a really useful tool and to be able to do something even if you're not a professional engineer. So with that, let's jump in. At a high level, basically what web scraping is programmatically reading content on the internet and analyzing the web page. So every web page that you typically go to, every web application is a combination of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript code on the front end. Sometimes there's other code that's running on the back end in different languages. And the web browser that you're using, probably Google Chrome, maybe Firefox, are making that kind of unparsable code human readable and interactable. And some cool things that you can do. So I'm here in Google Slides. I can view the page source, Control U. I think. Okay. But if I go to venturebeat.com, for example, and I do Control U, you can see this is what's going on behind every web page. If I come here also, and I right click on anything on the page, I can inspect it. And if I inspect it, it's going to show me where in the code I'm seeing this. I can see some information about the specific elements in the page. So these are some of the ways by viewing the page source or inspecting elements on a page, you can start to see exactly what's going on behind the scenes. Yeah, my last startup, we did a lot of prospecting, and all the contact information for folks in higher education, for example, are publicly available online, and we would just pay people offshore to go and Control F and go to websites. And if we'd had Replit at the time, we could have had one of our junior salespeople write a simple web scraping bot. Would have saved us a bunch of money, would have made us move faster. We would have felt more like confidence and reliability about the data. And it's just really kind of exciting. Once you start to see how easy it is to do some of this stuff, you'll just get more and more ideas about what you can do. So now it's time to jump in and fire up Replit. So if everyone can log into replit.com. So let's say, for example, we want to know what are some of the most common or most important topics in startup news. But the way that we're going to kind of accomplish our goal is by finding just common nouns, common proper nouns on venturebeat.com. And I'll walk you through step by step how to do this. But let me go ahead now. So now go ahead and I want you all to create your own Python REPL. So you'll see over here the kind of 3-bar menu in the top left. You can click New REPL and just create a new Python REPL. In that REPL that I invited you to is all of the code that we're going to build today. So if you ever get lost, you can just copy this code from here and paste it into your REPL. It's going to be super easy. And but I do recommend as we're going through that you try typing things out on your own. You'll make some mistakes, you'll run into bugs. That's kind of part of the learning process. All right. So the first thing that we're going to do, and our goal, remember, is we want to find all of the common proper nouns on venturebeat.com from all of their news articles that are on their site today. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get venturebeat.com into a REPL. So what you should write here, and I'm just in step 1.py, is import requests. This is a Python library. Give it a URL. So it's a URL equals venturebeat.com. And then we'll do response equals requests.getURL. And then print response.text. And then this right here is saying I want to get the first 1,000 characters from this. So if I go ahead and I run this really quickly, I'm going to show you what happens, and I'll explain again as we're going through. As I'm explaining this, try kind of typing things out. Let me just run this really quickly. You do need to write import requests. So you may not have seen this when I ran the code, but we actually installed this library for you automatically. So the first thing you would see before I output the first kind of 1,000 characters, remember when I'm viewing the source of VentureBeat, I've just got this in my REPL now, and I'm getting the first 1,000 characters of this over here. In order to do this, we're using a program that somebody else already wrote and is kind of publicly available for free. It's an open source library. And one of the bits of information that it includes is the entire source code, the entire HTML of the page. And when I do response.text, that's giving me all of the source code, and I'm just printing that out. But I'm going to move on now to phase 2. So now we have venturebeat.com. We've got all of this source code, and we need to find all of the URLs in here. So we want to know, as I'm like scrolling through this page, I want to find links to articles. So if I'm like hovering over an article here, you can see how at the bottom of my screen, it's showing the URL. Or if I like click on this, it's going to open in a new tab. So I want to capture this URL. And as I'm scrolling through the source code here, what you'll see, the way that these links are typically stored in HTML is you'll have something that looks like this: A space href equals, and then you'll have the URL in quotes. So it's actually quite complicated to go through and find all of these with like a, Control F if you were trying to do this manually, or even if you were just doing this with some of the built-in Python functions or things like that. So there's another library that helps a lot with this called BeautifulSoup. And it's going to take a web page and it's going to make it so you can do some really simple searches on it. So I'm going to come back into my main file, and I'm just pasting in the code, and I'll explain to you what is going on at each step of the way. So now we're getting BeautifulSoup. We're getting the same URL. This is the same thing we did before, but now we're restoring the response.text, the source code of the web page, in a new variable. And we do soup equals BeautifulSoup of the HTML. So it's turning this long text document into an object that you can interact with in the computer, and you can run some simple functions and programs and commands against. So the next thing that I want to do is do links equals soup.findAllA. And remember how I said that in HTML, when I'm finding these links, it looks like ahref. So here's like some relative links. So it doesn't have the whole HTTPS. And there are some that look more like this, but the whole web page written out. And both of these are valid, and it'll be able to find both of them. So now this is going to return an array, which is a list in programming. And I'm going to use a simple for loop, or it's just a loop to go through the array. So an array would be like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's like a list of numbers. And I'm going to go through each of those one at a time. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this is really easy to do in Python. I will just say, for each link in this list of links, I want you to print out what the link is and get that href object. Get that thing that's in between the quotes right here. So if I come back now and I run the program, it'll take a second to run, but now you can see we've got all these different links for different articles on VentureBeat. Let me pause What questions do you have about what we just did here?
This is a dumb question. Like,
No,
how do
no dumb
you
question.
always know which, like, where there are packages that you should try and install and build on top of versus try to write your own?
Yeah, so this is one of the most kind of important things as you like kind of learn and build experience is knowing what different packages and options are available out there and what you have to kind of build on your own. So like a junior engineer or somebody that's just learning out, or the ample market sales guys, when they get stuck and they run into a question, sometimes a single kind of question on Slack, hey, how do I do this? And someone will say this package exists, and there's lots of websites. Stack Overflow is really popular. There's tons of resources for finding this information out. But this is something that you just kind of learn over time. So I'm going to move on to the next step. Okay. So for the next step, we've got all the URLs, but you'll notice if I come back to VentureBeat, some of these are like not actually links to articles. Like you can see here, if I click on this, this is just taking me to another kind of page on the site. So I really just want to get these article pages. So if I start to look around here and I'm inspecting these elements and I'm seeing what these look like over here, move this, you can see that the general format for the articles is that they are kind of venturebeat.com / the year in a 4-digit number, and the month in a 2-digit number, and then the month in a 2-digit number, and then the name of the article. So I'm going to be looking for that pattern when I'm going through these links. So the next thing that we're going to do, but if I go ahead now and I'm copying for step 3, we're going to use something called regular expressions, which is a really powerful and flexible programming concept for matching different words and strings together. Strings is just another programming way of saying words. So if I come back to my main file and I get rid of all of this, so let me explain what's happening at each kind of step along the way here. So once again, we're importing a new package. We're getting the URL. I'm just doing a little thing right here to turn the URL into a different version of it so if I run this really quickly, but in any case, so what I'm doing is I'm taking this and I'm changing the way that it's formatted so it can be read by this other program. I'm turning this into a string to match other strings. And then I'm pulling down the web page. I'm doing the BeautifulSoup thing again. And now as I'm going through, I'm just saying, instead of printing every single link, I only want to print it if it matches a particular string. And this is kind of and don't worry too much. I can come back to this and get into more detail. Regular expressions is like a deep topic, but it's really interesting. I'm just trying to say that every string is going to say, the first thing it must start with is this venturebeat.com. The caret says it's the start of the word. And then after the end of the URL, I'm looking for 4 digits separated by a /, 2 digits separated by a /, and another 2 digits. So now when I run this, I'll just run it one more time. It'll happen really fast. You can see now that all of the URLs that it's spitting out are just the article URLs. So all of them match this pattern. So if you're curious and interested, there's a ton of resources online, but regular expressions are really flexible, and you can do some really kind of fascinating and interesting things to match particular words or phrases or types of phrases. So like when like, for example, in I don't know if any of you guys are like familiar with Todoist or other like kind of to-do list applications where like I can just type in a word for the date or time that this task is due, and it automatically recognizes that it's a date. So like they're using regular expressions and things like that behind the scenes to know, okay, like if I'm saying 1 p.m. or 1:00 p.m. or a.m., all of those should be flagged as a possible time. So there's a ton of flexibility that you can have with these. Cool. All right, so I'm going to move ahead. Actually, I'm going to move back really quickly. So one thing that's pretty interesting actually is if I go to, and I'm going to come back to step one. Let's say now that instead of venturebeat.com, I want to do bloomberg.com. And I'm going to just change the .replit. I'll say step one. So the .replit is just telling it what Linux command to run. I can tell it to run, Python step1.py, and it'll run it from here as well. So I'm running Bloomberg. I can get some information about Bloomberg. But if I go to, like bloomberg.com, and if I'm searching now for the source code, I'll be able to see the source code. And now if I go to do step two, I'm trying to get all of the URLs, you're going to see, oh, it's only running a couple of URLs. It's not giving me all of them. If I look at the source, I'm seeing a lot of links. But when I go to pull down the site, I'm not seeing any of them. I'm only seeing these ones. And the reason that that's happening is that all of this content in bloomberg.com is actually being delivered via JavaScript. It's not actually like in the HTML, CSS. And they're doing that because Bloomberg Terminals is in the business of selling access to news really, really fast. And it would be sort of against Bloomberg's business interests to be making it easy to scrape their pages. You can actually go for any website to the website /robots.txt to see the information that they're telling search engines and other scrapers. And sometimes they'll put some fun things in here, like here's a joke about the 3 laws of robotics and an invitation to apply if you know that this is here. But this is what search engines like Google and others are finding when they go to Bloomberg, and it's telling them how to scrape the page. But if I go to Bloomberg now, and I've got a kind of step 2A in here. Now let's assume that I try to run this, and I'm not getting the page from requests. So another thing that I can do is I can actually use a different program that allows me to programmatically open up a web browser. So I'm going to tell it to programmatically open up Firefox and try to go visit Bloomberg. And let me show you what happens when I do that. And this will take a second to load. But what you're going to see when this does come up is that it's going to show me we've detected unusual activity from your computer network. To continue, please click the box below to let us know you're not a robot. So we've been intercepted. They know that we're trying to scrape the site, and we're not being able to access the site unless we go through the CAPTCHA. Cool. So let's go back. So we just did kind of step 3, and I'm going to go back to running the main.py. Close the web browser. And we've got all of these articles. But now I still want to find the nouns in all of these articles so I can know what the most common topics are for in the venture news today. So for that, we'll go to kind of step 4. And I come down here and I copy this code. I will explain to you what is going on. This one's a little bit longer. If you'd like to type it out, go for it. Don't feel too bad if you just want to copy and paste or just watch me go. At this point, but we'll basically do everything that we've been doing before. There's one new package called collections that lets us do an interesting kind of command at the end that I'll explain to you. We're still looking for all of the news URLs here. So everything kind of up to this point is the same. And then once I get down here, we're going to create a new array. It's a new list of all the nouns across all of these articles that I've linked back. You could also say that I only want to do this for like the first 20. If I didn't want to do all of them, if I want to make them faster, I commented out. This is what that little like kind of hashtag space is doing, is it's making sure that the code doesn't get run on these lines. But I might say, I want to have a message for everyone that it's going to pull. So I'll just go ahead and do that. I'm going to, for each of these, do the same thing that I did before for the main page. Go get the website, download it, turn it into a BeautifulSoup object, and then I'm going to go through all of the words on that page, and I'm using another regular expression here, and I'm just saying if the word starts with a capital letter and it's followed by any number of lowercase letters, then we're going to say that this is a noun. So this is not entirely accurate. We're going to get some kind of interesting things you'll see here. But for the purposes of this, it's good enough. And then at the end, we're going to count them all up. We're going to see which ones are the most commonly occurring, and we're going to print that out. So I'll just go ahead and click run. You can see we're going to each of these web pages. And it might feel like it's going pretty fast, but if you're doing this across a large number of websites, it can take quite some time. And then here at the bottom, you can see we've got a lot of the most common words. So obviously things like VentureBeat are going to show up there a lot, but you'll start to see things like AI, like machine learning, GamesBeat, like probably another one of their sites, but like community automation, marketing, and you can start to get some ideas about like what are the your South by Southwest is like coming up in the news. So you might imagine that you're running this every day, and you could kind of see how these frequencies change every time. All right. Well, thank you so much for watching the video. As you can see, even with just a little bit of time and a little bit of knowledge, you can create something that's useful and can automate part of your work. And it's something that we're really excited about at Replit, just making it easier for anyone to code and for anyone to have an impact on the work that they're doing, their goals, and it really is easy. And I think the best way to learn is to learn by doing and to learn with projects. So if you're curious, if there's a site that you want to scrape, just sign up, create a quick Replit account, jump in, and have at it. Happy coding. Thanks.